Welcome to the deep dive. We're skipping the shallow end today. We're going straight to the core of some really important ideas.
Sounds good.
And our mission for this deep dive is to unpack a really thought-provoking TED Talk transcript. It's from Lori Gottlieb.
Ah, yes. Lori Gottlieb. Many people probably know her from the Dear Therapist advice column she writes.
Exactly. And believe me, her inbox, as she puts it, gives you a real window into the problems of living.
Absolutely. She actually kicks off her talk, and it really sets the scene for what we want to explore with you today with this one particular message.
Okay.
It was from a woman, married 10 years. Suddenly, her husband's acting differently, emotionally distant, maybe physically too.
Right. The classic signs often point to.
Well, yeah. Late night calls with a female colleague. And for this woman, it dredged up some heavy stuff from her past. Her father had cheated. So, instant trigger.
Okay, yeah, I can see how that would immediately frame the narrative for her. So let's jump right in. Gottlieb doesn't waste time. She introduces this idea of unreliable narrators. And crucially, she's not just pointing fingers. She means all of us. You, me, everyone listening.
Right, it's a universal thing.
The main point seems to be the story you're telling yourself about your life, it might not be the whole picture. And that partial picture can keep you stuck. So our goal here is to really dig into how these stories often, incomplete or maybe skewed by our own perspective, how they really genuinely shape our lives.
And importantly, how we might actually be able to change them, to rewrite them.
Exactly, rewrite them.
What's really key, I think, is that Gottlieb isn't suggesting we're deliberately, lying in these stories we tell ourselves.
No, it's more subtle than that.
Yeah, much more subtle. It's about how our perspective naturally makes us highlight certain things, certain details, while other things just kind of fade out. She quotes the psychologist Jerome Bruner, who said something like, "To tell a story is inescapably to take a moral stance."
A moral stance. Wow, okay. So even just recounting events involves judgment.
That's the idea. Our values, our experiences, they shape what we choose to emphasize, what we leave in the shadows. It's inescapable.
So these stories, they become our reality filter, basically. But here's the twist Gottlieb really focuses on. While they help us make sense of everything, which is useful, right, they can also become incredibly limiting. Sometimes, she says, they're just plain wrong.
Wrong in the sense that they trap us.
Exactly. They lock us into patterns of thinking, feeling, acting. And she flips the usual script. It's not just life shaping our stories. It's our narration actively shaping our lives. That's a powerful claim.
It really is. And one theme that pops up again and again in these narratives, something she sees all the time in her Dear Therapist letters, is freedom.
Freedom. Okay. How so?
Well, it's this paradox. Most of us generally believe we have a lot of freedom, in the big picture.
Very abstract.
But then when we zoom in on specific problems, a struggling relationship, a job we can't stand, maybe old wounds that just won't heal, suddenly we feel completely powerless.
I see that contrast. Big freedom out there, but right here, I'm stuck.
Precisely. And Gottlieb talks about these emotional jail cells we build for ourselves.
Ooh, emotional jail cells.
Yeah. And they're often built with the bricks of, pretty unkind stories we tell ourselves.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Oh, you know the ones. Scrolling social media, feeling inadequate. That little voice saying, you're an imposter, you'll be found out.
Yeah.
Or maybe a deeper belief, like you're just not lovable. Or maybe just constantly expecting the worst to happen. You probably recognize some of these, right? We all have them to some degree.
Definitely. And these narratives, they feel so true in the moment.
They feel incredibly real, but they can be so restrictive. Think back to that first letter writer.
Right, the woman whose husband was acting distant.
She feels caught, doesn't she?
Yeah.
Stay, but the trust broken. Or leave and put her kids through a divorce. A classic rock and hard place story.
Feels very trapped.
And Gottlieb uses this striking image. A cartoon prisoner shaking the bars of a cell. But the bars on the side are missing. The way out is right there. But the prisoner is so focused on the bars in front, on the story of confinement, they don't see it.
Wow. That really lands. We focus on the obstacles defined by our story.
Exactly. We feel hemmed in by circumstances. But Gottlieb's point is that our perception of those circumstances, the narrative we weave around them, is a massive part of the problem.
So, real freedom isn't about circumstances changing, necessarily.
Not solely, no. She argues it comes when we take responsibility. When we recognize our own role in crafting that story, even the uncomfortable parts, that's the first step to seeing maybe those bars aren't quite as solid as we thought.
Owning our part. Okay.
Yeah.
Which, I guess, leads right into the next big theme she finds.
It does. The second recurring theme is change.
Ah, yes. The desire for things to be different.
She hears it constantly. I really want to change. But, and this is a sharp insight, often what people really mean is they want the other people in their story to change.
Huh. Okay, yeah. That rings true. It's easier to wish someone else would change than to change ourselves.
Definitely. She uses this very direct analogy. If the queen had balls, she'd be the king.
Okay, blunt. But it makes the point. We focus externally.
We do. And we often resist changing ourselves, even when things clearly aren't working. Gottlieb suggests a reason that might surprise you.
Oh.
Loss.
Loss. But if the change is positive...
Even then, change means losing the familiar. Even if the familiar is miserable, it's known. We know the script, the characters, the setting, the same old arguments.
There's a weird kind of comfort in predictability, even bad predictability.
There really is. And that comfort, that familiarity can be a huge barrier. Stepping into real change. It's like facing a completely blank page.
Scary. The unknown.
Very scary. Gottlieb emphasizes that sometimes to move past these limiting stories, we actually need to unknow ourselves.
Unknow ourselves? What does that mean?
It means letting go of that fixed narrative, that version of me in my life that we've been clinging to, even if it's holding us back.
Okay, so if we're these unreliable narrators, stuck in stories, potentially needing to unknow ourselves, how do we even begin to edit? How do we change the narrative?
That's where Gottlieb brings in her analogy of the therapist and her dear therapist role, specifically as being like an editor.
An editor for our life stories. I like that.
Yeah. And she's not just editing one story in private. Through her column and talks, she's showing us, the audience, how we can become our own editors.
So what does this editing process look like, according to her?
Well, she describes it like editing a manuscript. You look for, like, extraneous material stuff that doesn't really serve the story.
Okay, cutting the fluff.
Right. You assess the protagonist are they actually developing moving forward, or just stuck in the same loop.
Character development.
Exactly. You look at the supporting characters. Are they relevant? How do they impact the protagonist's journey? And do the plot points, the events, actually build towards some kind of meaningful theme?
And the main theme she's looking for in that edit
are those two we just discussed. Freedom and change. Are we moving towards more freedom? Are we embracing necessary change?
Got it. But editing isn't just about taking things out, right? It's also about understanding what's there.
Absolutely. And that includes looking at the roles other people play, especially those who might, maybe unintentionally, keep us stuck in those unhelpful stories.
Ah, the enablers.
Kind of. Gottlieb has this great term for it, idiot compassion.
Idiot compassion. Tell me more.
It's basically well-meaning support that actually harms someone by reinforcing their flawed narrative. It feels kind, but it isn't wise.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Like, say you have a friend who constantly complains they never get promoted, but they don't really put in the effort. If you just nod and say, oh yeah, your boss is so unfair.
That's idiot compassion. You're validating a story that ignores their part in it.
Precisely. Or the friend who has the same relationship drama over and over, and you always take their side without ever gently suggesting they look at their own patterns.
Right. Gottlieb apparently has a saying for this too.
Yeah, a pretty blunt one. If a fight breaks out in every bar you go to, it might be you.
Huh. Okay. Points taken. We help people stay stuck sometimes.
We do, and we do it to ourselves too. The antidote, she suggests, is wise compassion.
Wise compassion.
Or sometimes she calls them compassionate truth bombs, basically helping ourselves and others see the parts of the story that have been conveniently left out, the difficult truths.
So bringing this back to the woman who wrote the first letter, the one about her husband, how does this editing lens apply?
Well, Gottlieb points out all the unknowns in that story. We don't know for sure he's cheating. We don't know why their intimacy changed. We don't know what those calls were really about.
Her past trauma is making her see it through one very specific, very painful lens.
Understandably so.
Right.
But it's likely only part of the picture. There could be other angles, other factors she's not seeing, or maybe isn't ready to see yet.
It reminds me of her Rorschach test analogy.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Tell us about that.
Well, the idea is if someone looking at an ink blot immediately says, well, I definitely don't see blood, the examiner might gently ask.
Okay, tell me what else you definitely don't see.
Exactly. It's about probing those blind spots, the things we're actively pushing away or refusing to acknowledge in our narrative. our point of view is inherently limited.
Brilliantly put.
Yeah.
And to really drive this home, Gottlieb does something quite clever in her talk. She presents a second letter.
One she wrote herself, right?
Yeah.
From the husband's perspective.
Yes. And wow, talk about a narrative shift.
What does his story look like?
It's completely different. His story isn't about infidelity at all. It's about feeling increasingly irritated, controlled even, by his wife, her trying to change his eating habits, things like that.
Okay.
And crucially, it reveals his deep, unspoken grief over his father's recent death. He's feeling lost, disconnected, and maybe those calls were about seeking some kind of connection, just not the kind his wife fears.
So, same situation, two vastly different stories, both plausible in their own way.
Totally plausible. And the fascinating thing is, both stories, despite their differences, ultimately reveal a fundamental human need underneath it all.
Which is?
Connection, understanding. They're both longing for it, just expressing it, and experiencing its absence in completely different ways.
And Gottlieb's point is that the act of trying to write the story from the other person's perspective, that's transformative.
Hugely. It builds empathy. It forces you to consider other possibilities. It literally opens up the narrative.
It also really shows how much our emotional state colors the story we tell, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. When you're feeling depressed or lonely or hurt or rejected, your whole perspective narrows. It's like looking through a pinhole.
And the story gets filtered through that negative emotion.
Exactly. Gottlieb says we can become our own fake news broadcasters in those moments.
Huh. Fake news broadcasters, that's good. Constantly reinforcing a distorted view.
Yeah, just playing that negative story on repeat until it feels like the only truth there is.
So, given all this, the unreliable narration, the need for editing, the power of perspective, what's the practical takeaway? What's the call to action?
Well, first, it's important to remember that second letter, the husband's view. Gottlieb crafted that based on her experience with many similar situations. It's a composite.
Right. It's an illustration of a possibility, not necessarily the truth of that specific case.
Exactly. The real message is that the first letter writer, and by extension, all of us, we need to engage in that editing process ourselves. We need to question our narratives.
Even if we don't know the ending, even if we don't know the plot outcome.
Especially then. The act of editing itself, of exploring different perspectives, creates more possibilities. It gives us more agency, more potential paths forward, even if the final destination is uncertain.
Okay. But what about people who seem really resistant? People who just seem stuck in negativity and shoot down any attempt to offer a different perspective?
Ah, yes. The ones Gottlieb calls the help-rejecting complainers.
That's the term. What's her approach there? It's unconventional, isn't it?
It is. Apparently, sometimes she just reminds them, very directly, we're all going to die.
Whoa. Okay, that's stark. Why?
It sounds harsh, but the intention is to shift their focus radically, to get them thinking about the bigger picture, about the story their life will ultimately tell, their obituary, so to speak.
So it's a prompt to think about legacy, about how they want to be remembered.
Exactly. Do you want the final story to be one of victimhood and complaint? Or do you want to be the hero of your own narrative while you still have the chance? It's about reclaiming authorship.
It really boils down to choice then. Choosing which stories to believe, which ones to nurture, and which ones need some serious editing.
That's it precisely. And the ultimate goal, as Gottlieb puts it rather poetically, we should all be aiming for our own personal Pulitzer Prize in the story of our lives.
Striving for a life story that's authentic, meaningful, and well crafted by us.
Couldn't say it better. So if we boil down this whole deep dive, the absolute core insight is this. The stories we tell ourselves have immense power. They're not set in stone. We can change them.
And the takeaway for you, listening right now, take a moment. Think about a story you're telling yourself currently, maybe about work, a relationship, maybe just about who you are. Is that story serving you? Is it empowering you? Or could it possibly be holding you back? Try, just as an exercise, to step outside your own viewpoint.
Yeah, imagine how someone else involved might narrate the exact same situation. What might their story be?
And that leaves us with a final thought, something for you to really chew on after this.
What kind of story do you actually want your life to be? And maybe more importantly, what editing tools? Perhaps a fresh perspective, some honest reflection, maybe just the courage to face a blank page. What tools do you need to start writing that story today?